How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the new DCU animated series, Creature Commandos. Now, DC animation has always had a special place in my heart, and this show is no different. And now that I've seen season 1, I've got a lot to say about it. Let's break it down, spoiler free of course. Now before we get into everything else, let's go ahead and talk about something pretty important. This is technically the official start of the DCU, but based on what happens in the show, the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker both happened. So this is kind of the third entry in the DCU. And honestly, if you loved the Suicide Squad and if you loved Peacemaker, you're gonna feel right at home with Creature Commandos. Now, while it does remind me of the Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos just seems to have a little bit more heart to it. We get plenty of time with each character, we get to understand their motivations, their past, and just really build a connection with them that we weren't able to in the Suicide Squad. First off, the voice acting in the show is absolutely top notch. Every actor brought their A game. But the two standouts for me were David Harbour as Frankenstein and Indira Varma as the Bride. The way that the Bride just commands a room with her no-nonsense attitude, her cold demeanor, she really does feel like a leader who, as the show goes on, starts to, develop a soft side and you really learn to love her. And then you've got Frankenstein, who somehow manages to be both sadistic and hilarious at the same time. It's this weird mixture of what Frankenstein actually says and just how he cannot read a room with how David Harbour actually delivers the lines. It's perfect. I loved him in every scene and I hope we get more of him. Now let's talk about the animation. If you've watched any of the DC animated movies over the last 10, 15 years, this is very similar to that style. The art style, the movement, it all reminded me of classic DC animation, which I loved. The action was another highlight. It never felt like it was forced, whether it was in the present day story or if we were going into a character's backstory. It never felt like they were just doing it for the sake to just give us some action. Every fight in the show had weight, and you could just tell that they put a lot of thought into how these characters move and what they were able to do. It was exciting without being overwhelming, which is just something a lot of shows struggle with. What really drives the show is the characters and their backstories. Each character has a different motivation for why they're doing what they're doing. Some of them are driven by trauma, some of them are revenge, and then some of them just straight up bullying as a kid. And what I love is that no two sides felt the same. And by doing that, it just made the team dynamic more interesting. Once you think that things got bad for a character, things get way worse as the episode goes on. I mean, who would have thought that that's what happened to Weasel? After watching season 1, I think my favorite characters were the Bride and Dr. Phosphorus, but let me know what your favorite characters were down in the comments. Now, if I had one issue, it would be that the overall story of Creature Commandos was kind of so-so. It was good enough, it just felt like they were struggling a little bit with balancing the current story, the actual overarching story, with all the flashbacks. Sometimes I felt like the story was stalling a little bit just to give us more backstory, and while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it did mess up the pacing for me a little bit. Also, I think the episode should have been longer. There were times where I was super invested and then boom, it was over. Obviously, watching all 7 episodes in sequence together is the best way to view this story, but when they were releasing these episodes every week, and every episode is only about 20 to 30 minutes long, you settle in, and then before you know it, the episode is over, and then you have to wait a whole nother week to watch it. And I get why they do that. It's just so frustrating where you have to wait a whole week and then you get this much more of the story. I understand why they do it. I just wish I could have watched the whole thing from start to finish right away. One of the coolest things about the show is that it teases this greater DCU without making that the actual main focus of the show. We got little glimpses of Batman, Clayface, Cersei, but it never overshadowed the main story. Instead, it just felt like we were just existing naturally in this world where there were heroes, there were villains, there were these characters with a long history in this world, and that's exactly how it should be. And that's something that a lot of comic book movies or shows really do struggle with. They try to focus on what is next without focusing on what's going on right now in the story that they're trying to tell. But this show, it stays focused. It doesn't sacrifice any quality in building up the future installments of what the story they're trying to tell in the future is. They just focus on what they're trying to do now. And speaking of things that comic book adaptations struggle with, consequences. You'd think by now that studios understand that stakes actually matter, but nope, they do not. We've seen it over and over again. Logan only came back because of the multiverse, and now Captain America and Iron Man are coming back in the new Avengers movie, probably because of the multiverse. Once again, I know they're not going to probably play the same characters, but it's the same actors, so that's what we're going to be seeing. And yeah, I get it, money talks. But when deaths and major events happen and there are no consequences to that, it just makes the story that you're trying to tell feel hollow. But Creature Commandos, it commits. The characters go through these actual tragedies, both in their past, in the flashbacks, and in the present day. It makes the emotional elements just hit so much harder because you know that they aren't just going to undo everything in the next episode. But let's see if the consequences actually stick in season 2. When you choose to tell these type of stories where there's this big, epic, action going on, everyone's fighting, there are lives on the line, you have to commit to whatever decision you make, and I hope that trend continues into Superman, into whatever stories they're gonna tell next. Overall, Creature Commandos was such a fun watch. It gave me exactly what I wanted, a mature DC story that wasn't afraid to get dark, but also knew how to have fun. It took characters that most people have never heard about and gave them their time to shine. From the animation to the characters, the show just hit the spot for me. And even though I think the overarching story is kind of forgettable and the episodes could have been a little bit longer, if this is the type of quality that we're going to be getting from the DCU going forward, we are in for a treat. Now that season 1 of Creature Commandos is over, I asked you all what you thought about it, and it seems like the majority of you really dug it. You gave it an A. So what do you all think of Creature Commandos? Did it live up to your expectations? Are you excited for the DCU going forward? Let me know in the comments. And if you're looking for more DC content, I got tons of videos. You can check them out right here. Until the next video, everybody, see you later.